Good evening and welcome to this week's episode of QTV, and we've got another varied lineup for you this evening, a great show ahead.
We'll be chatting with Margherita Coppolino, who shows us how disability isn't a barrier to being part of the community.
We continue our Glimpses into Asia series, visiting a mosque established in Indonesia for transgenders that found itself on the frontline battle against religious fundamentalists for its very existence.
Human Rights Commissioner Dixon talks about the ongoing negative attitudes from some police towards members of the Q+ community, and we delve into the past to remember Aunt Florrie, who was socially exiled due to her intersex condition.
Thanks, Kat. The short-statured is a terminology we use here in Australia. So actually it is short-statured living with a dwarfism. My condition is just my limbs. So I've got normal size hands, feet, normal size head and a very long torso. So it's really just the limbs that have the dwarfism type, so it's quite rare. What I love about the men's shorts, I can actually wear them as pants. So when the cargo shorts came out, no longer did I have to get alterations and pay lots of money. So fashion, absolutely, got much better as in dealing with short-statured, and because I actually have a normal sized torso, not a problem for me getting clothes with other short-statured people it is. I keep forgetting that I'm 4 foot until people remind me that I'm 4 foot. Predominantly, most of my childhood was in Geelong in an orphanage, and then I did my teens in Melbourne. My mother migrated from Sicily in the 50s when the Italians and the Greeks were migrating to Australia post-war. My mother fell pregnant on the boat out of wedlock. So she went to St Joseph's baby's home in Broadmeadows while she was pregnant, and then when I was born she signed the adoption papers, and then in those days if there was anything medically wrong with the child wasn't allowed to be adopted. So I was made a ward of estate for 18 years of my life. So that's how I became to be in an orphanage. I was raised with about 250 siblings, and there was always somebody to connect with or play with. And, I became very resilient early because of the exposure to so many people in my early life. I mean, there were some good, not so good times, but you get that in any family situation. Sex education in the orphanage, non-existence. I did experience sexual abuse when I was in the orphanage with extended situations. So, it's just, yeah. When it came to dating, it was an issue in regards to people accepting me as a human being and seeing me as a sexual being. I was living in an apartment on my own and became really good friends with a hairdresser who just happened to be gay. He took me to my very first gay bar, and I remember walking in and I went, there was just some sense of coming home. Hadn't quite worked out what it was. And it just kind of went from there. I never looked back. In those days, it was very butcher, particularly in the 70s, 80s. There was a very big women's movement, like the Kingston Hotel, women dancers at St Kilda Town Hall. As you can see, she's the boss. She wants to get warm. The LGBTIQ people with disabilities, predominantly the work that's being done in that area are for people with intellectual disabilities, and all the other disability groups, intersectionality tends to get left out. So we need to catch up and include the whole alphabet. In the past, what happens was that disability organisations spoke on behalf of people with disabilities. We've been saying for quite some time now, it really is about people with disabilities speaking for themselves. So the main work that I do as a consultant is to work with organisations around inclusion, intersectionality and human rights. I've moved from earlier days of the women's rights to disability rights, and my ethnic background, and now in the last 12 months become very vocal and very active in the LGBT space, internationally and nationally. And I quite often, when I'm talking at panels, talk about the whole self, whereas in the past I never did that. And that's what was really important about the UN gig. I got to talk about the whole Margherita, first time ever. Being comfortable in my own skin. That's what pride is.
Coming up next, we have the dramatic story of Pondok Waria and the Indonesian mosque set up for transgenders.
أشهد أن محمد رسول الله.
Artinya dengan adanya pondok pesantren itu kita memberikan ruang nyaman buat kawan-kawan. Pesantren ini 3 tahun yang lalu, I have problem with family, keluarga tidak menerima saya sebagai waria, terutama keluarga besar. Lama demi lama, orang tua saya, my mom, yang terima saya anaknya sebagai waria, ya sudah, yang penting kalau sama orang tua, aku nggak mungkin begini di rumah keadaan seperti ini, karena kan keluarga besar menolak. Aku lebih nyaman tinggal di sini karena satu tempat, satu nasib, kita waria semua gitu.
ormas fundamentalis ini terhasut oleh hoak yang diberitakan di media massa, bahwasanya di sini kami membuat fikih, membuat seperti itu. Artinya kemudian mereka terhasut oleh hoak itu. Pada bulan-bulan itu semua orang di Indonesia sedang benci dengan LGBT. Kan? Yang paling terkena dampak pertama kali adalah kawan-kawan Waria, karena Waria ini yang paling visible di antara LGBT. Nah,
sambut oleh polisi yang sudah berjaga di lokasi Ponpes. Belasan masa FJI ini mengaku mendatangi Ponpes untuk mengklarifikasi fikih Waria di Ponpes.
Kita keberatan karena nggak ada sejarahnya Islam fikih Waria, itu nggak ada. Dari zaman Nabi itu sudah ditentang dan Allah pun juga melaknatnya.
Front Jihad Islam itu datang menutup paksa di sini dengan mengatasnamakan penduduk di daerah sini menolak keberadaan kami itu. Kami kemudian mencari penguatan kepada pemerintah lokal, kita suan ke Ibu Ratu Emas, kita datang ke Komnas HAM, kita berhubungan, kita meminta bantuan dari LBH. Jadi kemudian kita menumbuhkan lagi kepercayaan masyarakat yang sempat dirusak itu. Kemudian lagi kita mengadakan trauma healing buat kawan-kawan, karena kawan-kawan sempat datang ke sini pun mereka takut. Nah, dan di sekolah sore itu kami juga mengundang tetangga di sekitar sini, jadi ikut ikut ilmu itu juga bisa diterima para tetangga juga, ibu-ibu di sekitar sini.
Harapan ke depan tentang pondok pesantren ini?
Ya harapannya kita simpel ya, nggak perlu muluk-muluk ya, artinya penting ini berjalan, teman-teman ada wadah, masih ada ruang untuk belajar bersama, ibadah bersama, karena kita ya berbeda ya, artinya berbeda secara karena teman-teman terkadang sudah membuat ketidaknyamanan terlebih dahulu ketika harus beribadah di tempat umum, ya kan? Jadi ketika ada tempat seperti ini,
menurut saya sih ya janganlah, soalnya kan kalangan tengah sendiri ini kan atau Waria ini kan dia juga punya kebebasan atau hak untuk belajar gitu kan, dia kan tempatnya untuk belajar menimba ilmu agama gitu. Nah menurut saya orientasi ya sama kan seperti kita gitu, cuman kan seperti kita juga menurut Tuhan gitu, jadi kita memfasilitasi mereka bagaimana mereka bisa beragama gitu, bagaimana mereka bisa belajar agama sama dengan seperti kita gitu. Liyakfuruu bima ataina. Bisa berhenti, harus berhenti. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin Rahmanir Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in Ihdinas siratal mustaqim Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghairil maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ كنتم أعداء فألف بين قلوبكم فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا.
Meraih hak kita, jadi ruang demokrasi yang sempat mereka rebut, kita rebut kembali, karena ini hak kami, hak Waria untuk beribadah, hak Waria untuk belajar agama itu sampai sekarang.
Coming up next, we have Human Rights Commissioner Catherine Dixon, who spoke on Joy 94.9's Saturday magazine. Then we delve into the past to look at our series A Moment in Time. This week's episode, Aunt Florrie.
Last week we spoke with the Victoria Police boss, the Chief Commissioner,
Graham Ashton, yes.
Graham Ashton. We had a great conversation about a whole range of issues, and he did actually highlight a report that was commissioned by the Victoria Police, which was undertaken by the Victorian Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission. To talk a bit more about that report, we've got Catherine Dixon in the studio.
The police ought to be commended because they have opened themselves up to scrutiny, and that does take courage, actually, particularly probably given some of the history of the police and the way in which they've had to enforce, sodomy laws, and there's a history, I suppose, of difficulties, with the way that the police have had to engage with the LGBTI community, and to then sort of to see change over time, and to then open themselves up to a review like this, which is looking at how inclusive they are for their own LGBTI employees, is an important piece of work, and they were honest in their participation throughout the process.
A lot's been said about the negative issues, the hypermasculinity, the heteronormative culture, aggressive comments, offensive language, sexual harassment, discrimination. And we know all of that. But really, is there any good news?
The answer is yes, and I think it's important to note that we did hear through this report and the experiences of LGBTI staff, we did hear about supportive and inclusive workplaces where LGBTIQ employees did feel safe and respected, and there's been a lot of good work that's been done. There's certainly a commitment from the leadership of Victoria Police to want to have a inclusive and diverse workforce, and there's some really fantastic networks. Their gay and lesbian liaison officer network, their VP Pride network. These sorts of formal and informal networks have made a big difference to how people feel included within the workforce and their preparedness to come out as well. Having said that, Tass, there is still it's not uniform, if I can put it that way. It's not. This isn't the experience across the whole of the force, and we've certainly heard that hyper-masculine and heteronormative culture still exists, and it normalises homophobia and transphobia, and it does result in an environment where not only do people not feel safe to be out, but they also don't feel safe to make complaints and reports, and in fact bystanders also don't feel safe to call out bad behaviour when they see it.
What do you do to change this? I mean, you wait for those people to leave the force eventually, obviously, but how can you, after all this time, 20 years of engagement with our community, you've got this situation and some of those comments which are just so offensive?
It's a really good question.
What do you do,
Macca? And I think these cultural change pieces, they do take time and they do take sustained commitment, and that leadership piece is really critical. And we've certainly suggested ways in which we can have more leaders within Victoria Police championing this issue, more visibility for LGBTI staff, and I think having a sustained commitment is the key, really, because this isn't a quick fix overnight. I mean, you may not be able to change everybody's attitudes, but you can certainly change the way in which they behave at work and they're expected to behave, and the accountability around that.
The report makes some very clear recommendations about developing clear policies and procedures, complaints handling processes. It talks about increased training and awareness.
If you know the demographics of your own workforce better, then you can make sure you're tailoring initiatives and strategies appropriately. And I just wanted to also say, Macca, off the back of what you were mentioning before about hypermasculinity, and we want the police to be assertive and to be able to get the job done. I think the point is we've got a diverse community, so we need diversity within the police to make sure the needs of the variety of people within our community are being met.
There's over 1,000 LGBTI folk in the police force.
And growing, you said.
And growing, just as there is, greater ethnic diversity, greater gender equality.
Macca, we've been doing a big piece of work since 2015 with Victoria Police on how to improve the experiences for women within the organisation and really trying to tackle the issues they've had around sexual harassment and sex discrimination as well. And it was in fact through that work and the surveying that we did of the workforce that we realised there was this LGBTI issue as well.
Catherine, leadership is one of the recommendations. Tell us about what that might look like. What would good leadership in the police force look like post this report?
Some of the recommendations, Tass, around leadership really are the importance of leadership from the top, and so just the critical role that Graham Ashton and others play within the organisation in not tolerating homophobia or biphobia or transphobia, not tolerating any form of harm against LGBTI employees, supporting this kind of work and calling these things out. And I think too what this report surfaces is the harm that people experience when those sorts of comments are made.
In 1997, Ian Richardson and his mother were looking through some family photos. They came across one of Ian's grandfather and his brothers and sisters. One of the sisters in particular caught his attention, a tall, thin, striking woman. "Oh," said his mother, "that's Aunt Florrie." At which point she suddenly became much more guarded about what she was prepared to say. Ian, of course, took this as a challenge and decided to find out everything he could about his great-aunt Florrie. Turns out that in 1914 she had gone to Bengal, then part of the British Empire in India, to join her fiancé Frank Pace. He was a Baptist missionary and she was there to help him. They married and things seemed to be going quite well. In 1918 they returned to Australia and it seemed like Frank was under some kind of cloud with the Baptist authorities. And then in 1919 Frank and Florrie were divorced. This was remarkable. In the first place, Baptists didn't do divorce. In the second place, when people did get divorced in those days, it was a long, drawn-out process and likely to attract the attention of the media and the scandal sheets like Truth in particular. This divorce went through very quickly and there was no mention of it at all, even in the scandalous newspapers. Ian decided he needed to check the court records for the divorce. And here things got murkier still. The Supreme Court announced that the records had been sealed forever and that he wouldn't be allowed to see them. It took him 2 years, but he did eventually get to see them. Frank and Florrie hadn't been divorced. Their marriage had been annulled. They hadn't been able to consummate the relationship because there was something wrong with Florrie. Florrie, as we would say today, had an intersex condition. She was coerced into having a physical examination and that the details of that were recorded in the court records. This explained why their attempts to consummate the marriage in 1914, beginning with their honeymoon, had failed repeatedly. As Frank explained that when they tried to have intercourse, his penis would go in no more than an inch, 2.5 centimetres, into Florrie's vagina. Florrie, we now know, had a condition known as complete androgen insensitivity syndrome. A person would have the appearance, the external appearance, of being a woman, but would have none of the internal organs. She had been divorced, and no matter how little people knew about what the cause was, the fact that she was divorced was a problem. She almost certainly suffered from depression and other psychiatric illnesses, and in 1945 she was confined to the Mont Park Mental Hospital, where she died 5 years later.
It's so sad to hear about the story of someone like Aunt Florrie, and it's so good that today people's knowledge has come on so much more that hopefully those things are very limited as opposed to what they were back then.
Absolutely, so fear-based.
But on a brighter note, it was great to see the reopening of the Pondok Waria, the Indonesian mosque, where they were closed down once by the fundamentalists and now reopened and got international recognition for doing that very act.
Such a great story of courage.
الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين